Hello everyone and welcome to another devlog video for Homegrown, the casual farming game I'm making using my own engine. This week I've got a new feature to implement all about the trees, and I'm going to try something a bit different in this video. I'm going to be going into a lot more detail than usual. I'm really going to try and take you through it step by step, show you the process that I go through to implement a new feature. So it's going to be a bit more technical, a bit less edited, but hopefully some of you will find that interesting. So this morning I've just been getting started with some planning, just to work out exactly what this feature is going to involve, how I'm going to implement it, and then I've broken that down into some individual tasks, which I've got listed out here in Trello. And now I am just about ready to get started with programming some of the basics for this new feature. So the trees in Homegrown currently don't do anything except for blocking you from farming there. So in this update I'm going to implement three things. Firstly, I'm going to allow you to cut down the trees. Secondly, I'm going to provide a benefit for having the trees in your farm so that you might actually decide to keep them. And thirdly, I'm going to allow you to grow your own trees. So I've just been getting started with some absolute basics. I created a new tree component which I can add to any of the tree entities. Currently it doesn't do anything, the tree component. I also just created a placeholder axe item and implemented a new item component, the axe component, which also is currently empty except for the fact that it links to the tree cutting tool, which is like a gameplay mechanic that the game can use. This is an object interaction tool, which means that it interacts with entities and not with the terrain tiles. It will interact with any entity that has the tree component, and it's currently also pretty much empty except for the fact that when the action's complete, it removes the entity. So let's have a look at this in the game. Here's that placeholder axe item. As soon as I equip this, the game goes into this tree cutting mode. So it can now interact with any entities that have the tree component, which these obviously do. And if I click on them, it carries out the tree cutting action, which for now simply removes the entity. I've just been adding some log items to the game. I added two different types of logs. When I'm creating items, in order to create the icon, I first create a model in Blender, and then I use my icon creator program to convert that into a nice icon that I can use. Then in the tree components, I've edited that so that it now allows me to specify what type of log that tree gives. And then in the tree cutting tool, when the action's complete, it just spawns that type of log in the inventory. So you can see if I cut down this tree, I get some pine logs, and if I cut down this type of tree, I'll get some oak logs. This afternoon I was working on adding some stats, so I added a speed stat to the axe, and you can upgrade that speed stat. And then for the tree components, it now can specify how many logs that type of tree drops, and the tier of the tree, which just determines how long it takes to cut down that tree. And then in the tree cutting tool, I've taken those new stats into account. So in the game, I've got a standard axe here. I haven't upgraded it yet, so I'm just going to use this to cut down one of these trees here, which doesn't take too long. But if I try to cut down this type of tree, this is a higher tier tree, so it takes a lot longer to cut down. So what I can do is I can go to town and upgrade my axe, upgrade the speed of the axe, and now if I come back and try to cut down this tree, you can see it's a lot faster. So it's been a good start to this feature so far. I've been making quick progress. Today I'm going to be moving on to some visual effects for when you're cutting the tree down. I've just been having a look at some other games for a few ideas and inspiration, and this morning I'm going to start off by trying to create a shaking effect for the tree so that it looks like it's moving every time it gets hit by the axe. So I've just implemented a really simple shaking effect for the trees. It's based on a sine wave, and then I decrease the amplitude of the sine wave over time. So pretty simple. You can see the code for it here. Here I generate the sine wave and then apply it to the rotation of the tree. And because the tree's origin is its base, it rotates around the base, and so it looks like it's shaking. Sound effects next, and I don't really know how to make sound effects, so mostly I just find free ones online, like this tree cutting sound, and then I just take the bits that I need, edit them a bit, tidy them up a bit, and then in the code I'm creating a compound sound effect here. I made a video about this a while back, so you can check that out if you want more information about how this works. But essentially I can build a layered sound effect that will last however long the cutting animation lasts. This one's pretty simple. I've just got a rustling leaves sound effect that I've got looping in the background, and then I've got the chopping sound effect that I can trigger whenever I want. So then in the tree cutting tool code, I've got this timer that loops, and then every now and again it causes the tree to shake and it triggers that chopping sound effect. So in the game, this is what that sounds like. Not too bad. Obviously I need to do something more for when you actually cut the tree down, when it falls over. I'll do that later. But this afternoon I'm going to start work on some particle effects. Next I've been working on particle effects, so every time you hit the tree, this leaf particle effect happens to make it look like the leaves are being shaken out of the tree. I did a video about my particle system a while back, so if you want more information you can check that out. These are all of the settings for this particle effect here, and I don't have an editor tool for the particle effects, but I do at least have hot loading, so if I change any of these settings, like this one which is how many particles are emitted, then that instantly changes in the game without me having to reload it. The final visual thing I need to add to this is obviously the animation for the tree falling over once it actually gets cut down, but I'm not going to be able to do that today because I need to go and catch a flight now. I'm going to Barcelona with my family for the weekend for my mum's birthday, so I'm going to have a few days break and then I'll be back working on the falling trees early next week when I'm back home. Back home in Hamburg now after a really nice weekend in Barcelona. Getting back to work this morning on the falling animation for the tree, which I've just got started on. I don't want to spend too long on this, but I just want to do a bit more work to make it look a little bit nicer than it does at the moment. So I've just finished making the falling animation, which you can see here. I'm quite happy with it. Could definitely do with some improvement, but this will do nicely for now. So let me show you it in the code and show you what's going on here. Obviously I made a sound effect to play throughout the whole process. Then the rotation of the tree changes over time, obviously, to make it look like the tree's falling over. And the rotation is controlled by this easing function. I can show you it plotted out here. So if the bottom here is 0 rotation and the top is 90 degrees rotation, you can see it starts off slowly, then it falls over quite quickly, and when it hits the ground it does one little bounce. And then back in the animation code, when it hits the ground it emits some particles, and at the end the tree model itself fades out. So yeah, and this is the result. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm done with the cutting down the tree part of this update now, and I'm going to move on to allowing you to grow your own trees, and for that I need to get into Blender and make some models. In order for the trees to be able to grow, I had to make multiple model stages for them, which is what you can see here. Then in the entity file for the tree, I can reference those models and I can add a growth component, which just tells the entity to cycle through those model stages over time as the tree grows. So in the game, you can see some of the trees growing here, and you can mouse over these younger trees to see their growth bar, to see how far grown they are. And then I also added a couple of sapling items which allow you to plant some new trees in your farm. Just finishing up for today, and I've been making some more models for the game. Firstly, I made this new building for the town. This is going to be the log shop where you can go to sell your logs. And I haven't completely decided on what style the buildings should have in the town, which is why this one looks a bit different from the others. I'm going to be doing a big graphical update soon where I'll finalise all of the art style for the game. But for now, I just wanted to try out a different style of roof, which I think ended up looking quite nice. And then I also created a load of models for the axe item, so that when you upgrade your axe tool, it also upgrades the visuals of the icon. So today I'm moving on to the final part of this update, which is to provide some sort of benefit for actually having the trees in your farm. Because at the moment there's no gameplay reason why you'd want to keep them, they're just taking up space and you'd always just want to cut them down and sell the logs. And that's not very interesting. I always want to try and provide the player with a decision to make, and there should be pros and cons of whatever they choose. So I've got an idea of how these trees could have a positive impact on your farm, and I'm going to start implementing that idea this morning. I've just been very roughly implementing this benefit for the trees, which is that they drop leaves, which I realise doesn't sound like much of a benefit, but you're going to be able to collect these leaves, which will give you the plant waste item, which is a very important resource in the game because it's what you use to make compost. And the compost system is also extremely important. A lot of plants in the game require compost. It's also the way that you add buffs to your plants. So when you're playing the game, you need to have a good source of plant waste. I did have a few other ideas of what benefit the trees could give. I think the most obvious one is that they could just give a buff to nearby plants, but there are already a few systems in the game that do that, so I didn't think the game needed another way of giving plants buffs. Plus, this way is just a bit more unique. There's nothing else in the game that does this, and it is very beneficial for the player to have this extra source of plant waste, so I think this will work quite well. Next, I've been quickly prototyping the leaf rake tool, which is what you're going to use to collect these leaves, like this, and you can see as I go around collecting these, it's adding the plant matter item to my inventory. The way this works, I had to create the raking tool mechanic in the code, which is a tile-based tool, unlike the axe, which was an object-based tool. And very simple at the moment. Whenever you complete this action on a tile, it just gets all of the leaves on that tile, and then for each leaf, it removes the leaf and spawns some plant waste in your inventory. I've been doing quite a lot of maths next today to improve the falling leaves. Firstly, to make them actually fall from the tree instead of just spawning on the floor. And then when I'm determining their spawning position, I've been trying to get them to avoid collisions so that they no longer spawn inside the trunk, and they'll also avoid spawning on top of other leaves. I've allowed for a little bit of crossover because, you know, they're leaves, but for the most part you can see they're now quite nicely spread out. So getting pretty close to finishing this all off now. I've just been tidying up the raking tool, added a sound effect to it, also added a little shaking effect to the leaves when you're raking them up, and a little disappearing effect when you're done. Again, this shaking effect is just done with a sine wave, and I multiply it with an amplitude value, and I change the amplitude value smoothly over time so that the effect starts and finishes nice and smoothly without any sudden jumps. So now I've just got one more task to do, which is to make the models for the rake icon. So I just created a few models for the rake for now. I made a few handles and also a few heads. You might remember from the video I did about icon creation that I can provide the item with those parts, and then in the game it will assemble them into a unique icon depending on how you've upgraded your tool. So if I show you here with the rake, if I upgrade the area stat, that upgrades the head of the rake. If I upgrade the speed stat, that upgrades the material. And if I upgrade the efficiency stat, that upgrades the handle here. Efficiency is a new stat that I've just created. It's perhaps not the best name for it, but when you upgrade this, it increases the amount of plant waste that you get when you're raking up leaves. So if I rake up these leaves here, I get 91 plant waste in one go, which is way more than I would have got with an unupgraded rake. And this is just to help you with the scaling, because as your farm increases and as you up your production, you're going to need way more compost. In fact, your compost needs are going to increase exponentially. One thing that's going to help with that is that obviously as your farm land expands, you're going to get more trees in there, so that will help, but it's not going to be quite enough to meet the exponential growth of your need for compost. And so one of the things you can do to help with that is upgrading the efficiency of your rake. So that's it for the trees. Another feature ticked off the to-do list, another step closer to release. Speaking of which, I did just want to quickly show you in Trello where we are in the grand scheme of things. Now that I've finished the tree update, I've only got 3 more features that I need to work on for the town gameplay. I realised the trees didn't have much to do with the town. Originally my plan was to have a guy in the town who was going to give you money based on how many trees you had in your farm. That was going to be the benefit of the trees. Obviously I changed my mind on that, but I still wanted to do the trees now because I was kind of looking forward to it. So once I finish these final town gameplay features, I'm going to be moving back to the farm to implement the final farming features that I want to get in before the initial release of the game. And there's only a few new features that I need to add, I think 2 or 3. Most of this is going to be iterating on previous features. And then after that, the game's going to be pretty much done in terms of features, and I'll then just be moving on to kind of polishing up, preparing for release. I'm going to be doing a big graphical update to make everything look as good as it can. Then I'll be adding all of the content, all of the vegetables, all the different fertilizers, the buffs, balancing it all, lots of play testing there, and then just polishing up, getting everything ready for release. So the end is just about in sight now. It's over there on the horizon, but I can see it. So that is going to be it for this video. Before I finish, I want to say a massive thank you to the top Patreon supporters from last month, who were Marcus Rechel, Viechu, Daryl Zuniga, Kevin Schau, Peter Osthazen, Ingo Moore, Henning KO, Helson Taveras, Andrew Romans, Marais, Shadeless Fox, Kimo Tamio, Coda the Tyler, Ross from 2 Minute Tabletop, Nikat Asgazada, Zanil Ambakar, Atomic Code, Walden Yan, Chris Naismith, Alan Nance, Wonaf, Dieter Reinert, Harry Chung, John Needham, Christoph Herpo, Matthias Barder, Hagen Vingard, Matthew Connaughton, Miggy Doze, Andrew Witt, Marek Mikolajczyk, Sean McCrory, Caffeine Coda, Timothy Gibbons, Alexander Chavez, and Neil Blakey Milner. So a massive thank you to you guys, and of course to everyone else supporting me over on Patreon. For this week though, that is it, so thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all again next time.